Hi, so today I'm doing another Top 5 Wednesday video, but this is another one of those that's my own and not from the official Goodreads group. So today's topic is something that is not one that the entire Goodreads group is doing for Top 5 Wednesday. But my topic today is Top 5 Weirdest Books that I've read. Now, some of these books on this list are weird in a good way, some are weird in a bad way, and I will go into why I think they're weird and if I think they're weird in a good way as I discuss each of them. And these aren't in any ranking, these are just the top 5 without any sort of number 1 to number 5 official ranking. And so here they are, those top 5 weirdest books. Firstly, I have The Wiccan and the Divine, which is by Kieran Gillen and a bunch of other people who I can't remember. This one started off as weird in a good way. I believe 4 volumes are out at this time, and I've read all 4, and the first one absolutely blew me away. I loved the art style, I loved the story structure, I loved the actual story itself, and it was just fantastic and interesting and cool and different and colorful but gory at the same time, and it was just really cool. And then it really fell apart for me, especially at volume 3 when the artist changed. The lines were drawn different, they just were differently shaped and colored and everything, and it just lost its just coolness for me, basically. And then it started to get convoluted and weird to the point where I didn't understand it and I didn't want to and I didn't like it, and just things were happening for the sake of things happening, and that just really turned me off from the book. This story is about a pantheon of gods from all different cultures. They're reincarnated every 80 or something years, and there's 12 of them always all together, but they are normal people who eventually find out that they are a god, and then they only have 2 years left to live, but in those 2 years they basically get like celebrity status, so they get anything they want in the world. And so that is a really cool story setup, right? It sounds like an amazing thing to read about, and it was, but then it just got weird for unnecessary reasons, and I just didn't want to follow along, basically, and so that's why it's on this list. Next is 100 Shadows by Hwang Jung-gyun. I'm probably mispronouncing that horribly, and this is translated by Jung Yuan. And I just recently read this last week, actually. It came in my Moth box back in March, which is a subscription service that Mercedes over at Mercy Bookish Musings does, and I'll leave a link to her channel and her description of her Moth box down below. It's a really short novel. It's kind of a magical realism book set in South Korea, and basically people's shadows are lifting up and becoming their own entities. And this follows the story of one sort of mid-20s girl and a mid-20s guy who both work in shops that are being closed down and demolished because they're building, you know, nice new shiny parks in that area. And while their businesses are potentially falling under, these two people's shadows start to rise, and it's about their relationship between the two of them and what they're going through and the sort of mental states that they are both in, which is very unstable. And this is a really weird book, but I really enjoyed it. I just wasn't quite sure. I finished it and I was just like, I'm not quite sure what I read, but I still liked it. The whole thing just basically gives you more questions as you read it, and instead of having any of them answered, you just get more questions. And it's just really cool because the shadows aren't the point of the story, even though the book is called 100 Shadows and like the magical part of it are the shadows. They don't talk about it all that often. Every once in a while the main characters or one of the side characters will bring up their shadow or tell a story in the past that involves the shadows, but that's not what the main focus is, and it just goes some really introspective, really interesting places, and it's really weird, really odd, but very well done, very lyrical, very cool. I really enjoyed this, and I highly recommend it. It was translated very, very well. I'm really impressed with the translation of it, and yeah, highly recommend. The third one I'm going to talk about is Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, and this is a fantastically weird book. This is a semi-short book about this man named Richard who is unsatisfied with his life. He lives in London, he doesn't like his relationship or his job, and he's just really feeling like he's drifting and floating and just not super happy. And then he runs into this girl in the alley who's bleeding, whose name is Dor, and she's in trouble, and she is you know, running from these people, and he helps her out. And when he helps her, she leads him to this under London, basically. It's called London Below, and it's a whole other London, but it's like underneath our regular normal London, and it's really cool. I loved it. I think that the villains in this are some of the creepiest villains I have ever read, and I thought that some of it was a bit unsettling, but the whole London Below universe is so interesting and just imaginative, and I will always be in awe of Neil Gaiman's brain and his imagination and how fantastic he is at creating these worlds, building them up really well, and this is no exception. It's just super weird. Nothing is ever quite explained fully, so you don't quite understand what's going on, which is how Richard feels too, so you really get to identify with Richard. I love it. I love it so much, and I highly recommend this one as well. The fourth one I'm going to talk about is Witches by Scott Snyder. This is a graphic novel that is really weird and creepy and haunting, and basically in this it has a whole mythology where these trees have entities in them that are like witches, and they kind of eat people. I don't know how else to describe it, but this girl moves with her family into this new town, and she thinks she's safe. She thinks she's like run from the monsters and she's safe from the monsters, but it turns out she's not. A lot of really gory things end up happening, but the whole thing is just so creepy and weird and unsettling, and the coloring in it just makes it all the more dark and gory, and so that is really well done. And I understand the appeal for it. I understand why the weirdness of it is cool, but it's not my taste, so I'm not going to be picking up any more volumes. I don't even know if any more volumes besides the first one are out yet, but I'm not going to touch those because they are too weird for me. Not that they're bad. They're just a no for me. They're just not my personal taste, but if you like that sort of thing and this sounds interesting to you, I would definitely recommend it because it's well done, just not for me. Finally, we have In the Shadows, which is written by Kirsten White and illustrated by Jim DiBartolo. The cool thing about this book is that it is two books basically in one. It is a graphic novel, which is the part that's done by Jim DiBartolo, and then it also has the written story, which is done by Kirsten White. And these two are meshed together. You get each story put in at one chapter at a time. So the first chapter is Kirsten's, the second chapter is Jim's. And while it seems like they're separate stories, they do eventually collide in a really interesting way. This is a story about two sisters, Connie and Minnie, who get sent to a house in a different town so they can be looked after. While they are there, they have some really supernatural things happen to them and that they see, and the two boys who live there also have been noticing some weird stuff going on. And then Jim's story is about a young adult. He's like a young adult man who spans many decades and has been tracking somebody or something specific or some sort of society. And eventually these two collide. These two stories collide. This is a really weird book. I, again, like the concept of it, but I just think that it didn't quite hit it for me. It felt like it expanded on all the wrong parts, and it felt like it was a bit forced at times, and there's so much potential for it. It's so interesting. I've never read a book that was meshed like this, and that was really cool, and like I said, it served to have a lot of potential. And the reason I'm including it in this list of weird books is because the supernatural element of it is something that is so inexplainable and something I've never read about before, and you don't really figure it out or find out exactly what is going on supernaturally until the very end. And so it just leaves you with this weird feeling the whole time, and the multiple elements that are stacked on top of each other that are sort of paranormal in nature are super weird. And so that's why I'm including it on this list. It was a very average book though. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars when I read it like 2.5, maybe even 3 years ago. So I don't know. I'm still on the fence about it. I liked a lot of aspects of it. I tend to like Kirsten White's books so much, and so I give her the benefit of the doubt. But if this sounds like something you might be interested in, I'd at least give it a try. Maybe get it from your local library and give it a try to see if you would like it. And that's it. Those are my top 5 weirdest books that I have read. You guys should let me know down below what some weird books that you have read are. I'd be happy to chat more about that with you. And thanks you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Happy reading.